What is going on, guys? Today, I'm going to be going over the fights that I would like to see in the UFC in the near future. Most of these are going to be happening, I predict, this year, but some of these could be happening, later on, maybe like early next year in 2027. But all of these fights will be within like 2 or 3 fights of, these fighters that I'm about to mention. But yeah, man, without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. First off, we got Arman versus the winner of Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira in the lightweight division, guys. I'm very, very excited, and I really want to see this fight. I think that the UFC's probably going to make Arman, fight one more time, as unfortunate as that is, because clearly Arman, I think, is the best guy in the division, but the UFC kind of hates him. I hope the UFC can come around on Arman, because I think that, around the time that Arman was coming up, breaking into that top five, when he had just beaten Dariush and he had, beaten Oliveira the first time, I think that a lot of people were thinking that Arman was he had a bland, boring personality, although he was a good fighter. But, now I feel like he's really broken out of his shell. I think that he's becoming more and more mainstream. A lot of people are, liking his personality. He's underratedly funny on the mic especially, but, on social media, he posts all these food videos, dude. I just think he's cool, bro. I think he's a cool dude. He's a chill dude who just fucks with like driving Lambos around and eating good food, and he's just a chill guy. And we even saw him stream with fucking like Aiden Ross and MMA Guru, stuff like that, man. He's just putting himself out there. I really like Arman now. I think that he's a really funny guy. But yeah, dude, I'm starting to like Arman's personality, and besides, that's kind of besides the point. But I do want to see him fight the winner of Oliveira versus Holloway. I made my prediction on this fight before. Thank you guys for, watching that video and giving it support. I really appreciate it. But I am picking Max Holloway, as sad as it is, to beat Charles Oliveira. I love Charles Oliveira, but I do think he's going to lose this fight. I think that Max is just way too good on the feet. I think that his boxing is way too crisp and fast for these lightweights. And I think that he's even got a good kicking game. He's got that jumping spin kick that he kept hitting Gagey with in their fight. He's got those, those knee stomps, those oblique kicks that he was hitting on Ilia Topuria. That's going to be there for him in this fight, I believe, against Charles Oliveira, as well as the fact that his boxing combinations are so quick, so fast, and so overwhelming. He's able to put them together super well, come into range and kind of overwhelm you with these shots, and right as you try to counter, he's able to slip back out of range. Extremely impressive stuff from Max Holloway, and I think that Oliveira's game is very, very simple. He's kind of just like a singular shot type of guy, and I don't think that's going to work against Max. It's just it's too simple and straightforward of a striking approach. And I think that he leaves himself open a lot of the times to get countered and to get hit, especially when he's coming forward. I think that Max can really take advantage of that. I'm picking Max by like a fourth round TKO. But, Oliveira always has that chance to lock up a submission. He is an offensive juggernaut. Maybe he can catch Max Holloway on the feet. Who knows? So I think that whoever wins this fight should fight Arman Tsarukyan to determine who the number one contender is. I think that it's pretty evident. I think everyone will agree with me that all three of these guys that I'm showing on the screen right now are better than the interim title challengers, Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje. I think that we can all agree that these three guys are all probably going to be able to beat both of those guys that are fighting this weekend. And yeah, dude, I think that the winner of this fight, Arman, and whoever, wins between these other two, will be clearly the second best guy at lightweight. And honestly, I would pick Arman to beat both of these guys. I think, we already saw that Oliveira fight. As close as it was, I think that Arman was able to damage Oliveira up really well in that guard. And Oliveira is very good at hunting those submissions, especially against Arman, whose A game is also, taking it to the ground and, hunting that ground and pound, maybe even finding a submission after you've really been beaten up, like what happened against Dan Hooker. I think that Oliveira would be able to, latch up submissions probably and at least try to choke out Arman. I do think that Oliveira is a little bit older now. He's even older than he was back when he fought Arman the first time. Obviously, it's been a couple of years. So I think that, physically Arman will be a lot stronger. Or maybe not stronger, because Oliveira's a big as fuck lightweight, man. He's big. So I don't know about strength. I think that Arman might have the slight strength advantage. But overall, I just think that Oliveira has taken a lot of damage in his career. I think that Arman is the younger, fresher guy. I would pick Arman to just mince up Oliveira in that guard, kind of like he did that first time, and maybe even find a TKO this time, now that Oliveira's chin is a little bit weakened. But against Max Holloway, which I do think would be the most likely scenario, because I am picking Max Holloway to win against Oliveira, I do think that in this fight, it is very interesting. This is like a very interesting, intriguing matchup that I would like to see. I am not completely sure who I would pick. I would probably lean Arman. I think that Obviously, Holloway is definitely going to have that range advantage. He's going to have just the general advantage in the striking on the feet. I do think that Armand doesn't leave himself super open like Oliveira does. He does overextend with shots sometimes, but I think that even if Max can kind of try to punish him, I don't think that he'll be able to hurt Armand Sarukian super frequently. Armand is pretty good with keeping his hands up in that guard, gauging distance. He has decent boxing fundamentals, good enough to, I think, maybe land on Max a little bit as well. But, I do think that Max would be able to outstrike Armand on the feet. But the problem is that Armand, his ground game is so overbearing, man. I think that, even between like Oliveira, Volkanovski, these other great wrestlers that Max Holloway has and will be fighting, I think that Armand's pure wrestling, freestyle wrestling game is better than both of these guys and everyone else Max has ever fought in his career. I think that Armand will be able to consistently implement his takedowns, even if he doesn't get them early. I think that he'll be able to get them later and later in the fight as he comes forward more. And as he puts that pressure on in the later rounds, assuming that this is a 5-round fight, which I think it will be if it's for a number one contendership. But I think that Armand will be able to implement his takedowns, and I do think that he will be able to get Max down if Ilia Topuria can do it. I think that Armand definitely will be able to get Max down. And yeah, dude, Armand, I think he's going to be much stronger than Max Holloway if he gets him, in that guard. I think he'll be able to mince up Max and just slice him up with those elbows, with that ground and pound. And I think that, honestly, if anyone can finish Max Holloway, I think that it could be, aside from Ilia Topuria, obviously, it would be Armand Sarukian. But, I would probably pick Armand Sarukian by decision and just landing more damage, heavily damaging Max in that guard once he takes him down. And even if Max kind of tries to improve on that takedown defense, Armand has many ways of getting Max. Like he's got those single and double legs, but he could even, circle around to the back off a failed attempt, grab that body lock, trip him. He's got a lot of avenues, man, on the ground, and I think that Max will not be ready or as prepared for someone as good as Armand just in the wrestling. And I do think even on the feet, man, obviously while Max has an advantage, I think that Armand is underratedly good on the feet. He's also got that shorter and stockier build, kind of like Volkanovski, and I think that Max always has had trouble with shorter guys. He didn't really have like any big moments against Frankie Edgar, although he did win. Frankie Edgar is a shorter guy, and he kind of had to like resort to just pitter-pat decisioning him. Obviously against Volkanovski, he lost all 3 times. I just think that I'm not saying that Armand is the level of striker that Volkanovski is, but I think that his height, kind of his shorter build with his weird reach, will kind of present a weird kind of dynamic to Max, and I don't think he'll be as used to that type of build as fighting a Charles Oliveira, who's also very, very tall for the lightweight division. And I think that, even against Topuria, Max had to, take a round or two to start landing more consistently on Ilia. So I just think that he would find landing on Armand a bit weird as well. Overall, I'd pick Armand to beat both of these guys. But yeah, dude, these are fights that I would love to see. Let's move on. We got Armand Sarukian versus Ilia Topuria, man. I think that Ilia Topuria would win this fight. I would love to see this after the fight that I just mentioned, Armand versus the winner of Holloway Oliveira. But I do think that ultimately Ilia Topuria is the best guy at lightweight. I was more sure of this pick before when Ilia Topuria first knocked out Charles Oliveira, because that was, kind of when he answered the question of, is Ilia Topuria's power going to translate against these lightweights? Is it going to be like a featherweight Conor McGregor moving up to lightweight, where, his power didn't exactly translate? Like, yes, he did have power, but he had to drop Eddie Alvarez like 100 times before he knocked him out. It was a TKO type of situation. It wasn't like he was colding these guys like he was at featherweight, where he colded Jose Aldo. He, fucking beat up, Chad Mendes, and TKO'd him, but very, very brutally. Colded fucking Marcus Brimage, right? He's colding all these guys at featherweight, but when he moves up against guys like Nate Diaz, against guys like Eddie Alvarez, he's not exactly, knocking them out with one singular shot. But with Ilia Topuria, we saw that it was indeed the case that his power, translated. And we saw that against Oliveira. I know that Oliveira's chin isn't, A1. It's not the best, but he's decently durable. We saw him eat shots for days. We saw him eat shots against Gamrot like fucking Tic Tacs. And I know Gamrot doesn't have insane power, but Oliveira's always been able to take a bit of a punch. Like, even against, Dustin Poirier, hard punchers, he got rocked and stuff, but he was able to recover, and he still kept the fight standing for the entirety of the first round. Ilia Topuria's fucking power is different, man. This shit is insane. And against Armand, I do think that Armand presents a very, very different challenge than anyone else Ilia Topuria has ever faced. he's just like the wrestling, man. The wrestling is very, very elite. And we even see Arman, like in RAF, Arman was able to out wrestle like freestyle wrestlers. This guy is very, very good, just in his pure wrestling technique. And I think that he will be able to get takedowns on Ilia Topuria. How well he'll be able to control Ilia is a question mark, because Ilia Topuria's ground game has always been a bit of a gray area. We saw him submit like Bryce Mitchell and stuff. But overall, we haven't seen him do too much on the ground. But I think that as a shorter, stockier guy himself, Ilia Topuria will be able to kind of explode up to his feet. And I think that he will be kind of harder to choke, and he will be harder to, land ground and pound on if you're Arman, because he can kind of like duck under your torso. He can kind of like find ways to maneuver even when he's in that guard, or even when Arman is in his guard. So I think that Arman, will definitely land some decent shots on the ground. He will be able to take Ilia down, but I think ultimately it won't be a complete like wash on the ground. I think that Ilia Topuria would be able to find his way back up. I think that Ilia Topuria would, have decent anti-wrestling in this fight, and I think that a good portion of that fight would stay standing. And in those moments, I just don't think Arman would be able to hang in there with Ilia. I do think Ilia does knock him out. But let's move on, guys. We got Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Islam Makhachev, guys. Now, the next fight at welterweight, I think, will probably be Ian Gary versus Islam. I think that Ian Gary is the number one contender currently, just because, he's coming off great wins, right? The Carlos Prates win has aged very well. The guy's bounced back to beat Jeff Neal, brutal spinning elbow KO, and then he went on to sleep Leon Edwards out cold. So that win has aged very well. Since then, Ian Gary has also beaten Bilal Muhammad, former champ, who was just a champion a couple fights ago. So yeah, dude. Ian Gary, I think, is probably the most deserving contender. As much as I don't like him, as annoying as the guy is, he is probably the most deserving. And I think that he does have certain challenges he presents to Islam. He's a very big, long, tall guy. And Islam, Islam has never been the bull in his fights. And what I mean by that is Islam has never had to chase his opponents down. It's mostly been his opponents either being the shorter guys or just being the guys who have been trying to advance more. Against guys like Oliveira was moving forward, really trying to hit Islam with something big, and Islam just countered him off the back foot over and over and over again. Islam is amazing at, just punishing you on the back foot and making you miss and just hit air. And against Volkanovski, right, shorter guy, moving up from featherweight, he did the same thing with Volk. And obviously Volk is like an S-tier striker, elite striker, so he did have some success. But Islam did outstrike Volk in that first fight. And against Jack Della Maddalena, the narrative was that Islam would be the smaller guy versus Jack. But if we're being honest, Jack is not the biggest welterweight. And yeah, I mean, we saw the way they looked in the cage. Islam looked like a fucking beast. He looked like a monster. He looked thick as fuck. And I'm not meaning that shit in a gay way, bro. Chill the fuck out. I don't mean that in a gay way. But he did look very bulked up and, like, thick, if you know what I'm saying. And I think that, he didn't really look like small or anything like that against JDM. And as a matter of fact, like, on the ground, he looked bigger than JDM. And they're, like, pretty similar in height as well. And, we saw what happened. Islam was just hammering low kicks and calf kicks at range, which really bothered JDM a lot. He did that from the opening bell to the end of the fight, whenever they were on the feet, which, I know it wasn't many moments that they were on the feet, but in the first minute of every round, Islam would try to hammer those low kicks, and we really saw that hurting JDM in those later exchanges, in those later rounds. And JDM would try to come in with big punches, and Islam would just, immediately, circle away and back off, and even catch JDM with some stuff. And Islam would also, try to go for some high kicks and stuff, but he never really had to pursue JDM in that fight. I think that in this fight versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, my point of, this whole, Islam being the bull thing was, I think that he will have to be the bull in this fight. I think that he would have to be the one as the shorter opponent. Shavkat's 6'1", 6'2", maybe even 6'3". He's very fucking tall and long and big. Good striker, really good at keeping you in kickboxing range and piecing you up like he did against Ian Gary. And I think that Islam would have to come forward if he wanted to, have any success on the feet. To land any shots, he would have to really get on the inside of JDM's reach and try to box him. And I feel like in that moment, I think that JDM would be able to land counters and he would be able to grab that clinch and land good knees. I think that Shavkat Did I say JDM? I don't know. Well, anyway, I'm talking about Shavkat. Shavkat will be able to, just find good counters and find good shots as Islam tries to come in and close that distance. And I don't think that Islam's been able to, close that, or he's had to close that distance against other people because obviously he's been the bigger guy in most of his fights. So I think that this would present a very unique, challenge for Islam Makhachev. And by that, I mean Shavkat's tall, long frame as well as his good, boxing and countering ability. And, I think that Shavkat, obviously, his ground game is, I think, a little bit overrated. He does have a ground game, right? But I think that he's kind of aura farmed his way into people believing that he has a great ground game because, his name ends with that OV. He's got that fur hat. He's got that, like, no, he's not. I know he's not Dagestani, but he's got that Dagestani type of aura. And, yeah, dude, I think that Shavkat, he got his back taken by Ian Gary. It's not a great look. I know Ian Gary's a good grappler, but he almost got subbed by Gary on the ground. And I just feel like his ground game, as well as the fact that his takedowns aren't super great, he really tries to like grab that clinch and like grab underhooks and try to like take people down against the fence with these upper body takedowns, which he's never been super successful at. A lot of people have been able to get out of that position, and what ends up happening is Shavkat kind of just holds the opponents against the fence for like extended periods of time, and they kind of just get separated, like Ian Gary and Shavkat Rakhmonov when they fought. But yeah, overall, I do think that Shavkat's ground game would be decent. Like he probably could contend with Islam a little bit. At least I don't think. Well, I don't know. Maybe he would get subbed, but I don't. I kind of struggle to see Islam subbing Shavkat, especially since Shavkat's such a blockhead. I think that he would be able to, gator roll his way out of certain chokes. I think that he would be able to probably get up in some moments if he ever gets taken down on the ground. And I think that he could, attempt takedowns against Islam just as kind of like an offensive measure to keep Islam from shooting on him. I think that Shavkat could try to shoot first a lot of the times, and I don't think he'll ever get Islam down, but that is a factor that he can take to prevent Islam from constantly shooting on him. And I think on the feet that Shavkat would have a decent advantage. I do think that Shavkat could land good shots on Islam Makhachev. However, I think that ultimately, I might have to still pick Islam. I know that I just spent the past couple minutes talking about how Shavkat could very well win this fight, but I think that ultimately Islam's control is extremely, extremely good. And I think that he might be able to just keep Shavkat down. It might kind of look like the JDM fight. And ultimately, as blocky as Shavkat is, I think that Islam, he always has that submission threat, dude. He definitely could submit Shavkat. Well, I find it weird to visualize. I do think that Islam could submit Shavkat. And if not, I think that a lot of this fight on the ground, Islam would be able to win these moments, land good shots, just control Shavkat. And I think that, on the feet, Islam could even land good shots, even though Shavkat would probably be having the advantage on the feet. But overall, I think that Islam would end up winning a pretty close decision, but a comfortable one. Let's move on. We got Anthony Hernandez versus Khamzat Chimaev at middleweight, guys. This fight is something I've wanted to see for a while. Ever since Anthony Hernandez beat Roman Kopylov, I was thinking, dude, this guy's definitely going to be a future title challenger. And now that we've seen this, he's about to be, I think that he does get past Strickland. That is an if, though. I will say Strickland has an underrated chance, as I said in my prediction, to beat Anthony Hernandez. But I think ultimately I will be going with Fluffy to win this fight. And I want to see him versus Khamzat Chimaev after Khamzat gets through Imavov, which I do think is kind of a foregone conclusion, and I do agree with that take that Khamzat does get through Imavov. I think that he will end up fighting Hernandez probably next year, because if we're being honest, Khamzat's fighting one time this year. Dude, it's been like 6 months since he last fought, and he hasn't even gotten like a title fight announced. So we kind of just have to assume that he's going to be defending his belt in the later half of 2026 against Imavov, as sucky as that is. But after that, I think that the next guy for Khamzat to beat it, or to fight, is going to be Anthony Hernandez. Khamzat was talking about fucking moving up to light heavyweight. Bro, defend your belt a couple times, bro. Defend your belt a couple times, and then we can talk about you moving up. But I do think that this fight would be the toughest fight for Khamzat at middleweight. I think that nobody else has that grappling prowess that Fluffy does to kind of match Khamzat. I think that skill for skill, maybe besides RDR, but RDR's, I can't trust his gas tank to hold up. I feel like Anthony Hernandez would be able to put that pace on Khamzat. If it stays on the feet, I think that Anthony Hernandez outdogs Hamzat, lands good shots on him, and just comes forward and just kind of destroys him if it stays on the feet. But obviously, that's not going to be the case. In moments that Hamzat shoots, he will be able to definitely get Anthony Fluffy Hernandez down. He will be able to control him in many moments. But Fluffy's a dog, bro. I think that he's got great get-ups. He's really good at threatening submissions off his back, just threatening submissions on the ground even when he's been taken down. And I think that he can reverse positions, threaten darts, chokes, things like that. And I think that I don't know how effective that stuff will be, especially against someone with the control and skill of Hamzat. But I think that those are things that he can try. He can give Hamzat many looks on the ground. And even when he's trying to like threaten certain chokes, like maybe like a triangle or like a darce or something like that, or a guillotine, he can create certain spaces of separation where he can scramble and also get back up. So he can use that as an avenue to get back up to the feet. And on the feet, like I said, if Hamzat does end up because obviously his last fight he went the distance. He went the distance against Dricus. He didn't really need to expend too much of his cardio in general, which is why he didn't really have any cardio issues in that fight. He was just able to lay on top of Dricus for the entire fight, and Dricus was the one who was gassed, and he was kind of able to control the pace of that fight. But in this fight, I do think that he will have longer periods of time on the feet against Hernandez, who I think would be more difficult to control. And I think that in those moments, he will have to be forced to strike with Hernandez. And I think Hernandez can win those moments. So, obviously, Hernandez could just get held down the whole time by Hamzat. That's a possibility, too. You can never doubt Hamzat's ability to do that. And maybe Hamzat can even find a sub, although I doubt it. I do think that ultimately Hernandez could pose to be a very, very tough challenge for Hamzat and land good shots and piece him up in the feet and get him backing up a lot. Ultimately, however, I will be picking Hamzat in this fight. If it ends up happening, I do lean Hamzat by decision, and I think it's going to be close as well. Kind of like the last fight, Islam versus Shavkat. I do think that this fight would end up being like a 3-2, maybe 4-1 decision for Hamzat, because I do think Hernandez will have success and he will be able to, at least for one round, keep the fight like mostly on the feet and be able to outstrike Hamzat. So yeah, dude. And also, Anthony Hernandez can land good damaging shots on the ground as well. So I think that he can actually land good shots on the ground when Hamzat's trying to, take him down, things like that. But yeah, I will be going with Hamzat in this fight. But let's move on, guys. We got Yuri Prochazka versus Hamzat Chimaev. This is going to be the last fight I talk about. And yeah, dude, like I was just mentioning earlier, Hamzat did have discussions, or at least he's been mentioning, at some point moving up to light heavyweight. And he's been talking about Alex Pereira. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Alex Pereira's been gone from light heavyweight. He's not coming back. He's going to be going up to heavyweight to fight, whoever it is, whether it's Jones or, Gone, Aspinall, whoever it is, right? I think that if Hamzat ends up going up, he will be running into Yuri Prochazka. Because by the time he goes up, assuming that he defends against Amavov and then defends against either Hernandez or Strickland, I think that he will be running into Yuri Prochazka, who by then I believe will be the champion. Because I think that, I've said this many times before, I think that Yuri Prochazka, now that Alex Pereira is gone from light heavyweight, is the best guy in that division. And I think that overall, dude, this fight is very intriguing. This fight is very interesting to me because there's, on one hand, you have Hamzat Chimaev, right? Grappling savant, master of freestyle wrestling, best freestyle wrestler in the upper weight classes, able to ragdoll most people, and I think that in moments he definitely could ragdoll Yuri. And he's able to just great control. We saw that against Dricus. Amazing control up top and able to threaten submissions. Although his submission game might be a little bit overrated in my opinion. He's got darce chokes, he's got those rear nakeds, but overall that's kind of the extent. Besides those chokes, that's kind of just the extent of his high-level grappling. He's able to kind of dominate his opponent into, giving up their back or giving up certain positions to their neck. But, we've not seen Hamzat get super creative with the submissions, like arm bars, leg locks, stuff like that. So, I do think that he mainly likes to keep it to those two chokes. And overall, he's great on the ground. But I think that Yuri won't get held down. I actually think that, there's a possibility he gets held down. But if I had to bet the house on it, I wouldn't say that Yuri gets held down and controlled the whole time. I don't think you can do that to someone like Yuri. I think you just got to put him out, dude. I think that's the only way you beat Yuri. I don't think you beat him by decision, and I don't think you do it by controlling him across 5 rounds. I think that Yuri would be too good and too explosive. He's big as fuck. He would be much bigger than, or not much bigger. Hamzat's pretty big, but I do think that he would be a decent amount bigger than Hamzat if they were to fight at 205. Yuri, the guy's huge, man, and also he's explosive. We saw against Glover Teixeira, a very formidable grappler, and pretty big as well. Good control on the ground. We saw what he did to Jan Blachowicz. He was able to take him down and really just control him and flatten him out. But he couldn't do that against Yuri Prochazka, right? Against Yuri, he would take Yuri down, try to control him in moments, but Yuri would end up, kind of rolling, getting to his knees, and he would explode. Like, he would find moments to kind of like shift, maybe advance position, get to one knee in moments, but stay overall defensive on the ground, and then just explode up when he can. And he's super explosive. I just think that in moments against Hamzat, he honestly could just explode up to his feet. Yuri's got an amazing gas tank. I think that he can push a pace that Hamzat can't, if I'm being honest. If Hamzat's not got control of the fight, which I don't think he'll have, I think that Yuri would actually just be able to push the pace on him and explode out of those bad positions, get back to the feet, and just come at Hamzat. And I think that, pause. But I do think that he'll be able to just come forward. That's what I meant to say. Come forward at Hamzat and just throw shit, bro. And you know how Yuri's game works, bro. He's just wild. He'll throw big leg kicks, big head kicks. He'll just swing hooks. And he's very underratedly accurate. Although, you can always talk about he's very unorthodox. He's not super traditional and technical in the, kickboxing. He is extremely, extremely accurate and powerful. He's got these weird looping punches that Lucas Tracy always talks about. They're weird and looping, and they take this weird path, but they always land on the mark. Like, that path that punch took against Volkan Ozdemir a couple of years ago when Yuri first debuted, it was such a weird path, and it looped around, and it just caught Ozdemir right on the chin and just slept him out cold. Just hit him right in the button, and he was out cold. I feel like he could definitely have a ton of success against Hamzat if he pushes the pace, if he keeps it a lot of times standing. He forces Hamzat to continue to shoot. I feel like Hamzat, in that case, would probably gas if he can't consistently keep Yuri down. And I think at some point he's going to realize that he can't just go out there and sub Yuri. In those later rounds, I believe Yuri can explode back to his feet, and his takedown defense will continue to improve. He'll just be able to, advance and just land consistent shots on Hamzat, and eventually I think he'll tag Hamzat with something big and maybe even put him out. Genuinely, I would actually pick Yuri probably by finish, probably by late round 4, 5, something like that, knockout for Prochazka against Hamzat. I'm picking Prochazka to beat Hamzat. And call me crazy. That's just my hot take of this video. But yeah, man. These are all fights that I'd love to see in the coming year, 2026, 2027, something like that. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.